BCTV, Tutucket TV, Campaign 2020.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this debate, which is being sponsored by the East Shore League of the League of Women Voters. Our opening statement will be offered by Christine Cohen.
Thank you, Carol. And first, let me just thank you for this opportunity. I'm State Senator Christine Cohen, and it has been my honor and pleasure to serve the people of this district in my first term. I'm running as a Democrat, a working parties candidate, and an independent candidate. And I mention that because I think it really speaks to my desire and ability to work with all people to move our state forward. I am a listener, a convener, and collaborator, and I know that we need to work together, regardless of political affiliation or background, to get things done. We've accomplished a tremendous amount in our short time together: the passage of 3 major pieces of gun safety legislation, expanding healthcare to make it more accessible and affordable, helping our small businesses through workforce development and eliminating red tape, fighting for our environment, ensuring we protect our precious natural resources. I'm so proud of our work together. We have a lot of challenges behind us and a lot ahead as we navigate a pandemic and what that means for the public health of our people and the economic health of our state. But I know that by listening to one another and understanding the needs of our various sectors and communities, we can see our way out of this and build a stronger Connecticut.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Mr. Laporta, 1 minute, opening statement.
Thank you very much. My name is Joe Laporta, and I am the Republican candidate in this race. I live in Madison with my wife and 4 children, but I grew up in Waterbury, one of Connecticut's largest cities. I went to college in state at the University of Hartford, where I have 3 degrees, a bachelor's of electrical engineering, a master's in engineering, and an MBA, all summa cum laude. I'm also a licensed professional engineer in Connecticut and Massachusetts. I've spent 13 years working in the electric utility industry, starting out as a lowly staff engineer and progressing to becoming an operations manager responsible for Greater New London County. And in that capacity, I've had the opportunity to work with people from all different stripes, from town municipal leaders down to bargaining unit, union, skilled tradesmen. I built a reputation on giving and getting respect to get things done, and I would take that with me to the legislative office building as your state senator. Today, you're going to hear 2 fundamentally different views of how our state government should function. And while we might not agree on everything, I just want to point out that it's my honor to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to earn your support.
Thank you very much. So our beginning question will be directed to Ms. Cohen regarding the state's fiscal situation. How would you address Connecticut's $1.2 million budget deficit, the rainy day fund, other funding sources, or cut spending? Please elaborate. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you for the question, Carol. And you mentioned the rainy day fund. We are lucky to have a robust rainy day fund thanks to careful planning and management. We've actually reached our legal maximum of just under $3.1 billion, and we've been able to use some of the excess to pay down pensions, which is badly needed. We do have a deficit that we're faced with. Our budgets would be just fine had it not been for years and years of not putting the appropriate dollars on both sides of the aisle into pension funds. And so now that's something that Connecticut really needs to contend with. But again, we are lucky to have this robust rainy day fund, and with careful planning, we can make sure that we make up any shortfalls that are sure to happen as a result of the pandemic that we're all faced with. We have just received some really good news that our tax receipts are much higher than anticipated due to a healthy stock market and deferred consumption of goods and services, as well as real estate conveyance tax receipts being up, which is also a terrific story about what's going on right now in Connecticut. It led to an almost 40% reduction in the projected $2 billion deficit that we were going to have to be faced with. But revenue improvements are accounting for $454 million. Spending is down due to employee attrition and department savings, as well as some careful planning and program cutbacks. So we have a $334 $4 million in savings. And again, brought down the deficit tremendously. So I think we absolutely need to focus on growth of our state. We need to focus on those small businesses, and we are going to have to dip into the rainy day fund. It is indeed a rainy day.
Thank you. Mr. Laporta, same question.
Thank you. I agree with Senator Cohen that if this doesn't qualify as a rainy day, I don't know what would. But I do want to point out that the money that we have in our rainy day fund is thanks to a bipartisan budget that was passed in 2017. And in 2017, the Senate was actually at parity. It was an equal number of Democrats and Republicans. So Republicans had a chance to come to the table and offer their proposals on the state budget to prop up this rainy day fund that we currently enjoy. So I do want to point out that the fact that we have this rainy day fund is definitely due to bipartisan effort, and in large part due to the fact that we had bipartisan representation at the State House. As it pertains to how we can prevent future deficits of this nature, there's only one proven way to get out of future deficits over and over again, and that is growing our state economy. And the only way we're going to do that is by passing bills and reversing policies that have made us inhospitable to business. Over and over again, every legislative cycle, new laws are being passed, and they don't necessarily have to be raising our taxes. Laws that get between the employee-employer relationship, laws that make it more expensive and more difficult to own a business and operate a business in Connecticut. I was getting my hair cut the other day, and the gentleman who runs the barbershop said if certain provisions get passed that keep being talked about, he'll just go back to being an employee and close his shop down. This is not the message that we need to be sending business owners in our state. And with that, I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Laporta. Do either of you request a rebuttal?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Next question, beginning with Mr. Laporta. Regarding the infrastructure, where do you see the greatest need for improving Connecticut's infrastructure? Are public-private partnerships appropriate vehicles for addressing them? 2 minutes with rebuttal.
Okay, thank you. As it pertains to infrastructure, this is something that I do in my daily job. Working in the electric utility industry, we have a large number of assets throughout the state of Connecticut and actually throughout the greater New England area. But the way that we do it in the private sector is we take a programmatic approach to our assets that are deployed to make sure we're getting the most value for the money we've already invested. I don't know that the state of Connecticut has done that. When we talk about infrastructure, it usually centers the debate around tolls, roads, and bridges. The way that I would suggest the state approach this problem is to take an inventory of every asset that we have using an engineering firm who does not have the chance to get subsequent contracts on the work. We want an honest understanding of what it is that we have out there, the age and the expected life remaining of these assets. We don't want to run into another situation where we have a bridge collapsing, as happened years ago. But we do want to make sure that we understand, using engineering data, what it is that we're faced with. Then we need to look at how it is we can pay for this. I am very much against tolls. I think it's another tax on the citizens. And I think it's a very non-progressive tax in that it will cost the same amount of money for an investment banker as it would an electrician to drive from New Haven to Stamford. I think that we need to look at the total amount of money that it would cost us to upgrade or improve on our infrastructure, which is another problem. When you talk about infrastructure, you need to determine, are we upgrading like for like, or are we increasing capacity? And once you know exactly what it is you need to do, you need to forecast those projects out, keeping in mind where your most critical projects are and attack them first. If this is done in coordination with reducing wasteful spending at the state level, we can improve our infrastructure in the state of Connecticut and avoid the need for tolls.
Thank you, Mr. Laporta. Ms. Cohen?
Yes, thank you. The issue is that we have over 300 severely deficient bridges and roadways, and we have a transportation system not meeting the needs of our lifestyles and business for the 21st century. It's preventing our economic growth and hindering our safety. So what do? The transportation fund, as my opponent just mentioned, is not getting better. And if we had it the way some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle wanted it, we'd be in a very precarious position without the rainy day reserve funds necessary to get get through this rainy day called the pandemic. And both of us, I think, just agreed that we absolutely needed those funds and will need those funds moving forward as we navigate this tough economy. I've said in the past, we're a pass-through state. There are 40% of drivers coming through from other states every day. We're charged to use their bridges and roadways, and they are doing damage to ours. But those repairs are instead falling 100% on the taxpayers of our state. I think we need a good, solid plan. I've been prepared to bring that plan to the people of our district for an honest and open discussion. Unfortunately, the plans didn't quite pass the muster, but I truly believe that we can get there by Dems and Republicans sitting down and hashing it out, much like has been done in the past, as was done with the bipartisan budget that Mr. Laporta mentioned. We've had two major funding sources for transportation, our gross receipts tax and our gasoline tax, both of which are drastically losing power because of the lack of consumption and the drop in gasoline prices. So we absolutely need to do something. There were proposals, for tolls within the last 2 years of the legislature. I think the question is, do businesses think that the transportation system is important enough to our economy to support tolls, or is there another plan? Thank you.
Thank you. Do either of you wish to rebut?
30 seconds, not so much a rebuttal as it is an addition.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I think overwhelmingly businesses, especially ones that are involved in the trucking industry or have multiple fleet vehicles, these businesses have made it very clear that they do not want tolls on our roads and bridges. It's another cost of doing business. It's going to make it much harder for these businesses to stay afloat. And we keep hearing about plans, but I want to know if any plans do or do not include tolls. That is the issue at hand, and that is what needs to be discussed whenever we talk about infrastructure.
Thank you. Any from you, Ms. Cohen?
Yeah, I would just add that there were several plans in 2019 that came through the legislature. One from the Republicans that wanted to take out of the rainy day fund and borrow to pay for our bridges and roadways, which would have created more taxes, more on the back of our taxpayers here in Connecticut, and that's just not fair. So we need to come up with a better plan so that businesses are enticed here, millennials are enticed here. Our transportation system just isn't passing muster.
Thank you. Next question with Ms. Cohen beginning, the answers for the environment. Clean energy and disposal of plastics are major areas of concern to the environment. Would you suggest legislative or agency policy changes to address these or other environmental issues? And you have 1 minute.
Thank you for that question. And obviously, as Senate Chair of the Environment Committee, this is of utmost importance to me. We actually have an existential crisis on our hands. Climate change is very real. Global warming is very real. Sea level rise, very real. And it impacts the people right here of our district. We live, adjacent to waterways of the state, the Long Island Sound. We have farmers throughout the state, rich in heritage here in Connecticut. There's a tremendous amount going on, a tremendous amount of work going on at the state level with respect to mitigation. We were able to get a plastic bag ban over the finish line in 2019, a huge win. We've been able to procure clean energy, wind power. We've been able to incentivize electric vehicles. We need to keep going down this path, and we need to take some bold action.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Mr. Laporta?
So as it pertains to clean energy, the rate at which we have been deploying green energy is unsustainable for our electric rates here in the state of Connecticut. The increase that we saw this past summer in our electric rates can be directly attributed to the last 8 years of nonstop green energy proposals that have come forward. If we want to, we need to look at green energy and renewable generation as one asset in a portfolio of generation. You wouldn't put all your money into one risky stock that doesn't have the technology quite yet up to snuff to be able to power the entire state of Connecticut. As it pertains to the plastic bag ban, while we were focused on plastic bags and banning straws and things of that nature, our state's trash to energy plant in Hartford was allowed to deteriorate. And now we have to truck all of our waste outside of the state of Connecticut to landfills in Pennsylvania and Ohio. I don't think that was a good thing for the Environment Committee to focus on.
Thank you, Mr. Laporta. Next question, beginning with Mr. Laporte. Remote learning has proven to be an enormous challenge for families and teachers during this pandemic. Many parents feel that their children are receiving a lower quality of education than before. Can you suggest how the state might offer assistance to address the inherent difficulties in 1 minute, please?
Absolutely. This is something that's affected me personally and many people that I know. COVID-19 has certainly changed us forever and brought a lot of issues to light. I commend the various school boards for their efforts to come up with a plan this year, but one size fits all just does not seem to be working anymore. I'm an essential worker, and I know folks who are also essential workers or people who work in the healthcare industry where husband and wife both have to go to work, and remote learning puts a real strain on their ability to not only educate their children, but just their daily lives. On the flip side, my wife is currently home with our children. So it's not as big of a strain on us as it is on them. I think we need to get out of the one-size-fits-all approach to education that we're used to in the state of Connecticut. We need to start looking at ways we can introduce choice. Not only can that adapt for situations like this once every 100 years pandemic, but it could also help to improve the quality of education for everyone.
Thank you. Ms. Collin.
Yes, thank you. And I actually have tremendous concerns with a voucher system that Mr. Laporta is referring to. I think it only serves to exacerbate the gaps in education that we have across the state, across the country, and across the world. And the pandemic is doing the same thing. We're seeing that communities where laptops are available and perhaps teachers have smaller class sizes are able to contend with this pandemic and distance learning, perhaps with more ease, although I would dare to say, I wouldn't venture to say that this is easy for anybody. But then some of the districts where laptops aren't available on a one-for-one basis, or that there's high levels of special needs and special education. We have a lot of work to do and a lot of learning. This pandemic hit us, and shifting to a remote learning system wasn't anything anybody had expected or prepared for. But we're doing our best with the resources that we have for us.
Thank you. Our next question, beginning.
Could I have 30 seconds to respond?
Oh, yes.
Sorry. Thank you. So I never directly mentioned a voucher system, but there are other ways in which choice could be implemented. Educational savings accounts that are not so dissimilar to your health savings account. I find it interesting, though, that Senator Cohen did mention that a one-size-fits-all is not possibly going to work. And we do have districts where, especially high special needs students, where the plan just doesn't seem to work. But that being the case, I think that only further emphasizes the need to include some element of choice in the way we educate our children.
Thank you. Okay.
No,
Ms. Cohen, did you have a rebuttal?
No, I would just say, just to continue on, I think, our school boards, our teachers, our staff, really deserve all the kudos in the world for doing what they're doing day in and day out and trying to differentiate instruction while some students are in the classroom and some students are home. It's a really tough job when all students are present, let alone when some are online and some are in class. And so they have yeoman's work ahead of them, and I'm grateful for their service.
Thank you. Next question, beginning with Ms. Cohen. Do you think poverty is at the heart of Connecticut's education testing disparities? Can you suggest any solutions? 1 minute.
Thank you. I do think, when we started to get into these education gaps and inequities, I served as a school board member prior to being sworn into the state Senate. And this is certainly something that we have to contend with as a state. It's not unlike most states throughout the United States of America, we have extreme levels of wealth and extreme levels of poverty. And we need to really be propping up working families to make sure that people are getting their fair share of the economy and they can give back. And that in turn will help our students and our education. I think we do need to address the testing gaps. We need to address the gaps in education, getting better school staffing, making sure there's equity in staffing from district to district, making sure there's equity in learning and classes that are being offered so that these students have a better chance of taking these exams.
Thank you. Mr. Laporta?
Yes, I don't think the exam should be the end goal. I think a quality education should be the end goal. I think the exam is just a symptom of the problem. The problem is that we damn students to failing school districts based on the zip code that they're born into, and that's not right. And I don't think throwing more money at the problem is going to be a magical solution. In Madison alone, we give $65 million to Hartford. We get $1.5 million back. Every year, we continue to see the money that's coming to our 12th district towns cut for education funding. I think we need to start looking at ways that we can give parents a choice so they can escape failing school districts and give kids an opportunity. Introducing choice, introducing competition is only going to make a better end product for everybody.
Thank you. Next question, beginning with...
I'd love to just give 30 seconds if I could.
Sure. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. I think after, 9 years of not following an education cost share formula, the state did adopt a new formula in 2017 to address some of these inequities, enrollment, wealth. Towns were changing significantly. They as a result in the bipartisan budget had to reformulate and created a new formula for towns going forward that will address some of these gaps and inequities.
Mr. Laporta, would you like to rebut that?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, next question, beginning with Mr. Laporta. Is there sufficient relief available for those who lose jobs or close businesses due to the pandemic? Or does the state need to supplement federal PPP grants? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. So one thing that we need to talk about when we talk about the state's relief efforts during the COVID-19 pandemic has been the slow response of the Department of Labor. And we often hear accountability talked a lot about. There was a lot of bills and a lot of proposals that came out in the legislative special sessions that centered around accountability. But where's the accountability for the people who went 12 weeks without a paycheck because the Department of Labor couldn't process their claims fast enough? Now, I know these are unprecedented times, and I don't mean to come down too harshly on them, but I think that one thing we need to look at is what could we have done better, and how can we improve the systems for the future in the event that we're in this situation again due to another spike or a reversion back to a phase 1 or a phase 2 timeframe. Certainly, I saw some information recently that said Connecticut proposed $5,000 of assistance. We are far less than any of the states around us. Again, I want to focus on the solving the systemic problems going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a top priority of mine. We absolutely need to get businesses, the backbone of our economy, back to a place of doing business and generating dollars and therefore creating revenues for our state. The pandemic is the biggest issue affecting our state right now. I think we've done a good job of taking action to tamp down and mitigate the spread of the virus, but we're always trying to thread that needle of ensuring public health and safety while getting businesses and workers back on track financially. PPP, the EIDL loans, the initial bridge loan that the state was able to provide, they were all terrific, but we absolutely need more. We need to be pushing our federal delegation to make sure that we get another infusion of PPP. I'm thrilled that DECD, the Department of Economic and Community Development, announced an additional relief package through CARES, but it's just not enough. We need to do more for these businesses.
Thank you. Any rebuttal? 30 seconds.
If I may add one thing, Part of the problem is the arbitrary way in which businesses were deemed essential or non-essential. We have Main Street small businesses that were forced to close while their big box corporate counterparts were allowed to remain open. I am afraid that we might be witnessing a large transfer of wealth and business, if you will, acumen from the small business to more large business, and I'm fearful of what businesses are not going to come out of this period.
Ms. Cohen, would you like to rebut?
Yeah, I would just say that, and not a rebuttal, but just say that I have been meeting with small businesses across the district on a regular basis. These men and women, business owners, are finding it hard to pay rent. They are finding it hard to keep their employees employed and on the books. We must do something. We've got a crisis on our hands, and these businesses are going to leave buildings left empty for the future. So we absolutely need to put our heads together and do all we can to ensure their existence.
Thank you. Next question, beginning with Ms. Cohen. Are Connecticut residents, especially women, sufficiently protected in terms of their health care needs, or will new legislation be required if Roe versus Wade and/or the Affordable Care Act are overturned?
Thank you. Do I have 1 minute or 2 on this question?
1 minute.
Okay, thank you. Whew, this is a big question for 1 minute. So we have made tremendous strides in healthcare. I do worry tremendously with our current administration in the White House and what's happening with the Supreme Court with what the future looks like for us. We've already seen extreme attacks on women's health. We created a council on women's health in 2019 to ensure we're monitoring the environment on women's health care, as well as advocating and taking action as appropriate. We have codified Roe v. Wade in the Constitution of Connecticut. So we're in good shape there because we had careful planners to make sure that is not overturned here in Connecticut. But the ACA is on, the Affordable Care Act is on the chopping block. And if that is overturned, I'm going to continue working to codify these most important parts, like pre-existing conditions that we were able to get into state law. And I'll push for solutions like a public option to ensure people have affordable options for insurance and health care.
Thank you. Mr. Laporta.
Okay, so naturally it's a federal election year, so this is going to come up as a wedge issue to try and divide people. But if you look at when Roe was decided, it was a 7-2 decision in a 6-3 Republican-leaning court. And in the 80s, the court was 8-1 Republican with a lot of pro-life presidents who had appointed judges. And like Senator Cohen said, it is codified in state law. So I think it's, I don't want to say much ado about nothing, but I think it's a non-issue as it pertains to Connecticut. What I'm more concerned about are some of the more radical abortion proponents' wish lists, namely parental notification. And as a parent of 2 young girls, I'm very concerned that the state of Connecticut does not have any parental notification for minors who seek an abortion. The states around us not only have parental notification, but some of them even have parental approval required. And what that does is it creates an environment where abusers can take their underage girls into Connecticut and get abortions without parental consent. A bill was put forward by Republicans to try and get that approved in Connecticut, and the Democrat Party voted it down.
Thank you. Rebuttal by either of you?
Thank you. I would just say that I want to make sure that women's health and reproductive health is protected, and that needs to happen here in Connecticut. We shouldn't be at an age where we're worried about somebody going, to a back alley doctor to get health care or not seeking health care at all. We saw the removal of Title X funds. That was a scary situation. We're in a great state here in Connecticut where we're ready. We're at the ready to protect that funding.
Thank you.
30 more seconds, please.
Yes.
So that law that I mentioned about parental notification, there was even a proposal in it that allowed an underage girl to receive an abortion. All she had to do was tell the clinic, I would be thrown out of my home or something of that nature if my parents found out. It was still not voted on by the Democrat Party. I think this is a miss, and I think it protects pedophiles and people who prey on young girls.
Thank you. Next question, beginning with Mr. Laporta. The Police Accountability Act You both have indicated continued interest in Connecticut's new police accountability law. Is the recent Old Saybrook police interaction with a person with Down syndrome an example of a need for better police training, additional professional staff, both, or other action? And would you amend the law? 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. So I think both myself and Senator Cohen approve of the idea of additional training for officers, and certainly training for people with disabilities could absolutely be a portion of it. But the bad far outweighed the good in that law. A lot of times when laws come forward, and I do want to start off because this is a 2-minute response, the vast majority of bills that pass in the legislature pass unanimously or pretty darn close to it. But there are certain bills that are a little more divisive, pass on party line, or don't have the same amount of support. A lot of people can vote for a bill if it's 51% good, 49 bad. This bill was 99% bad, maybe 1-2% good. I think we need to look at a wholesale restructuring of this law. The removal of qualified immunity was a very bad idea. It puts the livelihoods of officers at risk. It's going to make it more difficult for people, good people, to want to become officers. And it's going to cost our towns more money, not only to purchase the liability insurance, but also the accreditation requirements that go far beyond just training, but also intricacies of how the building of the police department is laid out. I think overwhelmingly, what we see with the police accountability bill was a knee-jerk reaction that really doesn't do anything to solve the problem that they were looking to solve.
Ms. Cohen.
Thank you. I want to be clear. I have always held our first responders in very high regard. I am so proud of our local police, firefighters, all first responders for going out there each and every day and protecting us. With regard to the police accountability bill, there was a call from the people of Connecticut, but in truth, this has been going on for a long time with the Judiciary Committee. We listened to both sides. I listened to both sides. In particular, we compromised and came to a better place. Many people were demanding further training, police accountability, and I made it very clear after listening to our local law enforcement officers across the district that I did not want the removal of qualified immunity. The initial bill did remove qualified immunity altogether, and I said I would not vote for that bill. I just think any officer who makes a mistake under this bill simply cannot be held liable. Egregious police misconduct is very rare, but certainly fairness demands that if it does happen, those harmed should be treated like the victims of any other kind of misconduct. And I don't know if my opponent would want to give immunity to a police officer who engages in willful, intentional, bad faith conduct that hurts someone. I would think not. But people who are doing their job, police who are doing their job, deserve to have our protection, and those who violate their oath in an extreme way that the law provides, they do not. This is not much different than existing federal rights laws, which have not led to an avalanche of different lawsuits. And thank you for the question.
Thank you. Rebuttal from either of you?
Yes, please. So it's important to examine Connecticut's law versus other states' laws. Connecticut's law places no limit on the amount of damages that can be sought by somebody who sues a police officer. Certainly, the removal of qualified immunity didn't protect police officers from willful misconduct. There are other laws that still covered that, and to suggest otherwise is a little disingenuous.
Ms. Cohen, would you like to rebut?
Yeah, no, I'm not suggesting otherwise. I'm suggesting that there was no way for somebody under qualified immunity as it stood, if there was willful and wanton misconduct, to go, hold that police officer accountable. And certainly I've spoken with many law enforcement. They don't want those bad apples as part of their police force. It's very rare that they exist, and they feel that gives all of them a bad name. So I think this law was a step in the right direction, but we still have some work to do with it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, okay. All right, next question, beginning with Ms. Cohen. For the Connecticut Conference of the Municipalities recently wrote, the effects of systemic racism have consequences in housing, education, health, wealth, and nearly every other part of daily life. In fact, race is still the #1 predictor of success and well-being in our country. You have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, I mean, racial and social justice has been, something that we've been talking about for many, many years and has really been brought to the forefront, especially in light of George Floyd's recent murder. And that was a tragic situation. We really felt the call to do something and make some changes across the state of Connecticut and across the country. I'm proud as Senate Chair of the Environment Committee that we were able to do something about environmental justice. We just passed that law in this past special session. We've been working very hard on that. We know that Black people are much more likely to live in a heavily polluted area and I'm talking about middle income Black people are much more likely to live in a heavily polluted area than low income white people. They are getting sick, from the carbon outputs of these facilities, and we need to be paying attention to that. So I'm really proud that we just strengthened our environmental justice legislation. Am I out of time? I know the timer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Laporta.
Yeah. So the problem with a lot of legislation and policies like Senator Cohen is referring to is that it equates all forms of inequality to come from equity, to come from a position of race. And I don't believe that systems can be racist. I believe people are racist. I don't believe in systemic racism. I believe that regardless of where you are or where you come from, while we don't all get dealt the same hand at birth, we certainly all have the same opportunities in this country to make something of ourselves and to look at me, I'm proof. I grew up in Waterbury. I'm living in Madison now. So I think we need to be very careful when we talk about these things, that we're not just using them as a cover for redistribution.
Thank you. Is there a rebuttal from either of you?
Yeah, I would just say, that if you talk to folks in our Black and Brown community, I think they may disagree. We have stats that tell us otherwise with respect to income and jobs, wage growth, with respect to where they're living and affordable housing, with respect to the environment and environmental justice. These are all clues that tell us that systemic racism does in fact exist, and we need to do our part to step in and see what we can do to fix it.
Thank you. Next question, beginning with Mr. Laporta. Do you agree that people of color, especially during this pandemic, struggle to thrive in a society that often marginalizes them? If so, can you suggest measures to address this in Connecticut? 2 minutes.
Could you repeat the question for me one time?
Yes. Do you agree that people of color, especially during this pandemic, struggle to thrive in a society that often marginalizes them? If so, can you suggest measures to address this in Connecticut?
That's a heck of a question there. And there's a lot of presumptions in the question in and of itself. I think all people are struggling right now in the middle of a pandemic. And certainly if you look across our lower income folks, they're probably struggling more than the folks in higher income. A lot of the jobs, a lot of the small businesses and large businesses closed as a result of the pandemic. Those were jobs that were on the lower income scale. A lot of folks with higher income jobs, remote jobs, technology jobs, they were able to adapt to either working remotely or working from home. But I think that when we focus solely on that which divides us or that which makes us different, whether that's race, whether that's religion, gender, we miss the full story. We need to stop picking winners and losers with our laws and with our policies, and we need to look at everyone as an individual. Every single person, no matter who they are, no matter what their background is, we have many different facets that make us who we are. whether we're white, whether we're Christian, whether we're whatever. The logical conclusion of those intersectionality analysis, if you will, is individualism. And I believe in individualism, and I believe that we need to pass laws that support the individual and not pass laws that look to do something for this group or something for that group. We need to make this state and this country a better place to be, no matter who you are. And I think that is the proper role of government.
Thank you. Ms. Cohen?
Yeah, thank you. And yes, to answer the question, I do think because there are dramatic wage inequalities between white people and people of color, I think that is absolutely exacerbated in times of economic downturn. There's no doubt about that. I don't profess to have all the answers to that. I think we absolutely need to be mindful of it and know that as we move forward and we create packages to get folks back on their feet, we have to be mindful that there are these inequities and these gaps in wages and figure out how we can help people get back on their feet, get back to their jobs. The economic impact on low income earners has been far more significant than the rest of the labor force. And that's what happens that's what's happened in our last few recessions. It's been a huge impact on those low wage earners. And it's critical that we double down on our efforts to educate our workforce for the jobs of the future. We worked a lot in 2019 on workforce development programs, making sure that people have core competencies to go and apply them to different jobs, varying jobs that we're opening across the state of Connecticut. And it's the time for programs like the Skill Up program, for instance, which was introduced during the pandemic as a chance, an opportunity for people to gain those core competencies, go through online training programs and portals to train a future workforce and ensure that these folks can get back to work and get a paycheck.
Thank you. Do either of you wish to rebut?
Just to add maybe, workforce development programs, workforce training programs are just one phase of the solution. The other phase of the solution is to have a business environment that people can move into and not move out of Connecticut and go find work somewhere down south in a more business hospitable environment. In addition to training people for jobs in 2020, we also need to create an environment where jobs can exist in Connecticut in 2020.
Thank you. Ms. Cohen?
Yeah, and I would say that when I'm out there talking to businesses, what they're telling me is that they need qualified skilled labor to hire. And in order to create a qualified skilled labor force, you need to develop that workforce and create workforce development programming, creating those core competencies, as I had mentioned, giving them the skills that they need in the trades, in manufacturing, some of the technical skills.
Thank you. Next question, beginning with Ms. Cohen. In this era of hyper-partisanship, could you suggest ways to achieve more bipartisanship in Hartford? 1 minute.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Carol. And, I think this is an important one, especially important to me. I think you could ask many of my colleagues across the aisle, and they'll tell you that I always try to work in a bipartisan manner. I have a great relationship with the ranking members of the Environment Committee, as well as the Commerce Committee, on which I am vice chair. I, collaborate with my delegation, which is obviously, we're not all of the same party. And I collaborate with members of my delegation on a regular basis because it's important that we collaborate in order to get things done. We're always hearing things like, they voted with their party, across the board, or they did this, they did that. The bottom line is the reason you're seeing so many people that vote with their party is because 70% or upwards of 70% of the legislation that comes out of the Senate is bipartisan. It goes on a consent calendar. So everybody's voting for it. And that's because we do the work to reach across the aisle and work collaboratively so that we're all at the table.
Thank you. Mr. Laporta.
So Senator Cohen's correct that the vast majority of legislation is unanimous, bipartisan, or pretty darn close to it. But the only way we're going to ensure bipartisanship up in Hartford is to have bipartisan representation there. Over the recent past, the only time we had, like the rainy day provision that we were talking about earlier, was in the 2017 budget because Republicans had enough membership in the Senate to force it to be there. Unfortunately, what we've seen historically in Hartford, and I won't attribute Senator Cohen to this, but largely Republicans are shut out of conversations. Even with the police accountability bill, there were Republican members of that committee who weren't even aware that a public hearing was going to happen. And of course, it wasn't a public hearing, it was an online listening session. So I think it's great to talk about bipartisanship, and obviously that is the goal, and that is the lofty goal, because when both sides are represented, you get a better quality product. But evidence shows until we have bipartisan representation, we won't get bipartisanship.
Thank you. 30 seconds, Ms. Cohen.
Thank
Anybody
you, Carol.
else?
And I would just say, I'm not sure where my opponent got his information on the police accountability bill, but everybody on the Judiciary Committee, including ranking members, were aware of the public hearing. The ranking members were in conversations with the chairs of that committee and were very well aware of its contents as we move forward. And I would just say that I think that's true, that we need to work in a bipartisan manner, but the Republicans didn't even present a budget last year. So it's not a throw your hands up, but we're not going to work anymore because we don't have an equal number of seats in the Senate. We all have to work together.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question, beginning with Mr. Laporta. Do you support changing Connecticut's constitution and adopting legislation to provide for early voting and no excuse absentee ballots, as 39 other states have done?
1 minute or 2 minutes?
One.
Okay,
1 minute.
thank you.
Thank you.
So certainly providing additional access to the democratic process is a lofty goal, and it's bipartisan. That's why during the special session, when the opportunity came to expand absentee ballot access due to COVID-19, it was pretty much bipartisan and pretty much unanimous. But there was one dissenting vote, Senator Dennis Bradley out of Bridgeport, a Democrat, who remarked that he found absentee ballot fraud to be prevalent in his city. Those aren't my words, those are his words on the floor of the Senate. Now, as much as we want to increase access to the democratic process, we have to also do so by ensuring the integrity of the election. The mass mailing of absentee ballot applications exposed many people who are on the voter rolls who may have passed away or no longer live there. The reasonable position to hold is that while we are attempting to expand access to the voting process, we also have to make sure that we are respecting the integrity of the election. Connecticut's law that was passed 2 years ago to amend the Constitution doesn't include any time provision. So you could cast a vote now for the next presidential election. And I don't know any state that has that. We got to be reasonable.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Ms. Cohen. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I wholeheartedly believe that we should make voting as accessible as we can for everyone. Those who work off hours or are vital caretakers shouldn't be left out of this process. We need to join the masses. We are one of 6 states that doesn't allow pre-election day voting, and we need to change that. This should be something that the people of the state have a strong voice in. It requires a constitutional change, as you mentioned, Carol, and as such must appear on the ballot for a vote. We were close in 2019 when a supermajority passed a proposal out of the House, but unfortunately, my Republican colleagues in the Senate did not agree with its premise. And so while it passed, it did not do so with the 2/3 majority required to get it on the upcoming 2020 ballot. Now we must go back in with a different legislature to pass the same resolution for a hopeful placement on the 2022 ballot, which, yes, again, I am in support of.
Thank you. 30-second debate. Rebuttal. I'm sorry.
No, thank you.
No? Okay. Okay, the next question, beginning with Ms. Cohen. Is there an additional issue of importance that you would like to address? 1 minute, please.
Well, I think, the single most pressing issue facing Connecticut and the United States and the globe right now is how to ensure public health and safety during the coronavirus pandemic. Every aspect of our lives, our social interactions, education, business operations, elections, sporting events, and more continues to be adversely affected as we contend with this deadly ongoing virus. My job as a state senator is to support state and federal government policies that take a two-pronged approach. And first, we must take a scientific approach to combating this virus, which means wearing our face masks, washing our hands regularly, and engaging in social distancing, and making sure that these tried and true measures are taken care of. But we can also grow, because our government has a vital role in providing financial aids to the families and businesses hurt by the economic impacts of the pandemic. So we have to work in concert together, to make sure we have robust and widespread economic recovery in Connecticut.
Thank you. Mr. Laporta.
So the question was open-ended, so
Yes.
I won't talk about COVID-19, but what I will talk about is public safety at large. We mentioned the police accountability bill, but we have other public safety issues in the state that are probably even far more pressing. For many years now, we've been letting violent criminals out of jail early. We are a sanctuary state. Now, when the Trust Act was passed a few years ago, it was done to make it so that way undocumented people could report crimes to the police without worrying about themselves being deported. But we've removed the exemption for people on the terrorist watch list and the known FBI gang member database. I think that's made us less safe. I don't think that was a good idea, and my opponent and all her Democrat colleagues did support that legislation. Amendments were put forward to try and carve out exemptions for those specific individuals, and they were voted down on party lines. I really think we're headed in the wrong direction for public safety in Connecticut.
Thank you. At this time, we will begin our closing statements. There will be 2 minutes each, and we'll begin with Christine Cohen.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you once again to the League of Women Voters and Totucket and BCTV for hosting this debate in a manner that keeps everyone safe and healthy. And thank you, Mr. Laporta, for being here. I'm a moderate, bipartisan, research-driven legislator who cares deeply about the people of the state, its environment, education, healthcare, and economy. I'm focused on finding workable bipartisan solutions to Connecticut's most pressing public policy needs. As a mother, a business owner, a former school board member, and now as a state senator, I have the experience and the ability to weigh and synthesize various options and outcomes to find the answers to a variety of problems affecting many different constituencies. I believe that we do our best work when we're working together, and my track record highlights my ability to work across the aisle and develop real results for our district. I'm energetic, honest, and committed to serving the people of Connecticut with integrity and compassion. I love this beautiful state and feel so privileged to live here. I adore the communities of which I am a part and the work that I do to serve them. I'm committed to making those communities stronger, and I'm grateful every day for the honor to serve the people of the 12th District and bring their voice to Hartford. And I'm hopeful that the constituents will once again put their faith in me on November 3rd or when they cast their absentee ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Mr. Laporta.
I want to start off by thanking the League of Women Voters and thanking Senator Cohen for taking part in this as well. But I also want to extend some thanks to my extended family as well as Senator Cohen's family. I don't think most people realize the toll that running for office has on the loved ones and the family members of the candidates, and I would be remiss if I didn't extend my gratitude to both families. They certainly didn't sign up for this. So that being said, I want to end with a question. And the question is to the voters in the 12th District. And do you agree that we are heading in the right direction as a state? Is this the state that we want to leave behind to our children? I agree with Senator Cohen that this is a beautiful state and we're probably the best part of the state. But my concern in this is that when COVID-19 is over, we're going to go back to business as usual. We cannot go back to business as usual in Connecticut. We've had largely one party rule for the last, my whole adult life, it seems. We are near the bottom of every major economic indicator that there is, and we have some of the highest taxes in the nation. Our businesses continue to leave the state, and our housing values were going down until the pandemic got more people to leave the cities and to come to our state. But we need to use that as an opportunity now. The nature of work looks like it's changing. We talk about Connecticut being a pass-through state earlier. I don't know that that's going to be the case anymore. As more people adjust to living remotely, we have a lot to offer. We need to right-size our state government. We need to cut where we can, cut wasteful spending, and cut regulations that aren't doing any good for our state and only hampering business. We need to build business, build industry, and give people a reason to come here to live, work, raise a family, start a business, and to stay here when they retire. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to run as the Republican candidate for state Senate, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with Senator Cohen. It's been a blast.
Thank you. I'd like to thank both of our candidates, Christine Cohen and Joe Laporta, for being here today. I would like to thank Totucket TV for the use of their studio, and all 6 towns in the 12th Senate District will receive a recording of this debate for their local TV and online links. I would also like to remind people that the League of Women Voters is a nonprofit volunteer membership organization, and we say thank you to the East Shore League of the Women Voters for arranging for this debate. Thank you for watching, and be sure to exercise your precious right to vote on or before November 3rd. I wish you a very good evening. Thank you.